The wafer paper is very, very, very inexpensive. And the tools used to do molding are inexpensive. We are using half of a press mold for flower making, petal making, and leaf veining. So it's something that a lot of artists in the culinary world already have. It's an investment they've already made. These flowers are extremely light. The big flower that you see at the bottom is probably about 2.5, 3 inches across, and we're talking about a weight in the order of a couple of grams. That dragée, that chocolate dragée in the center, weighs more than the flower petals themselves. It's very light. It's flexible. It remains. It has some spring to it, so you can fold and smush things around a little bit to get things to fit. And it likes humidity. It doesn't go soggy. It doesn't melt unless you get it literally wet with water. So there are a lot of advantages to traditional flower making. What I do stress, though, is all of the wafer paper, everything you're going to be seeing today, is an add to. It's a new technique to add to what you already do. This isn't intended to replace anything. I mean, a gum paste rose is always going to be exquisite. So can I make a wafer paper rose? Yes. But rather than take the time to do that and assemble, I've already got the skill set to make a rose. It's gorgeous. So I'll put the energy into just the leaves or filler flowers. So again, it's another tool. It's adding to, it's not replacing anything.
That's good. I was just about to ask, should you transfer over this and just forget about, so.
That would be a shame, especially it denies you the ability to combine techniques and layer. Layering a gum paste with a wafer paper and then doing some roll icing piping, anything that layers techniques is going to look more interesting than a standalone. And that's my aesthetic, is I like layering. Wafer paper comes in a sheet, and I'd say go ahead and switch the camera to me, and I'll pick up a few little things here.
Oh, good. Okay, it's working. Yay! It's the first time I've ever done this, so
yeah.
So yay.
Okay. Well, the wafer paper just comes in a sheet of paper. It's just very flat, and it comes in a pack of 10 to 100 sheets, and it cuts very easily. So you just cut out. I will set a little cardboard template for all my leaves and petals, or I'll punch for specialty shapes. And the trick is, there's the punches. And there's some of the molds, my favorite molds to use that you're seeing on the screen there. Mm-hmm. And wafer paper shrinks as it dries. So it's very, very important to experiment with your molds and test, because you want a mold shape that's round like this, because you want the paper to shrink against the form. Like this this is my favorite flower petal mold. You can see it's got nice round. Mm-hmm. So it gives a surface for the paper to shrink against. If I used the other half of the mold, which is cup, what will happen is the wafer paper will pull up out of the mold.
Okay, and kind of fold in on itself.
Mm-hmm. You just use this half. You don't want to try pressing. Save this little guy here for making little blossoms where you want something to pull away from and curl up in on itself.
Okay.
And let's see. You can use plastic tweezers are the one thing that you're going to want. These are just like little gem tweezers. And you're going to want on silicone. You're going to want to work on silicone or silicone mats, because wafer paper, when it's wet, is very, very sticky, very gummy. And you have a fairly short work window of dipping your petal into water and placing it on the mold, and it'll just slump. It'll just go, and that's that's the hardest part for people to pick up, is figuring out the work window. Once you've got that little bit of experience, the molding is very easy. So that's pretty much it. I mean, give yourself about a half hour, 45 minutes to just play with wafer paper, see what the work window is, see how fast you can slip like almost like a water decal. Dip into water and slip it across the mold. There should be a picture coming up that shows what the wafer paper looks like on the molds.
Okay, let me see if I can find that.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. Perfect example. Yes, perfect example. You can see at the bottom, those are leaves. And on that blue mold, you can see how the wafer paper goes transparent, and you can almost see how sticky that is just looking at it. You just set the paper on that mold and just let it dry. That's pretty much it. I will use a dehydrator to dry quickly, or I'll put it under a heat lamp from a chocolate warming box and let it dry on its own. It dries, a leaf can dry in 5 minutes. A full petal arrangement, because there's more water involved, takes a little longer to dry, maybe 7 to 10 minutes. If you're in a dehydrator or under the lights, it'll dry even faster. If you're working with warm molds, it'll dry faster still. So that's another advantage of this technique, is it's very fast. You can cut out a petal, mold, dry, airbrush, and assemble a flower in half an hour.
Okay, great.
The best way to go is assembly line, is just process. Boom, 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 boom. I will cut out a bunch of shapes and have them at the ready. The molded pieces like this, I'll mold them up and I'll throw them in a box, and no desiccant required, and just store them until I have a project, and then I color per the requirements of the design and assemble. So they last for, forever.
Awesome.
Pretty much. Yes.
That's great. Okay, so another question. Can you use anything other than a silicone mold?
Try. I know that if you're working on aluminum, like I do cherry branches, and I'll use an aluminum armature, but you've got to have a lot of oil on that. The wafer paper likes to stick and adhere. It really does. I've tried it with some plastic molds, but you're going to have a mold release agent of some sort, whether it's PAM or cooking spray. It gets a lot messier to work with, but try. And it's like with all the molds that you're looking at. You see the shape of the molds there that I'm working with, but some molds work better than others, just like anything else. See what they do. Wafer paper likes to be organic shapes. Each one of these petals, each one of these leaves is going to dry slightly differently. So as soon as they dry, they already have the individuality of nature. This process doesn't like to be highly structured. Lots of tight right angles, or just let it be nature. That's what it wants to be. Let it work with what it wants to do, and you're going to be a lot happier.
Awesome. Okay, so an overview of basically the process. So you're going to just dip it in just plain water. Does it need to be warm or cold, or?
Yep. When you're learning, the cooler the water, the better. The warmer the water, the less work time you have. The faster it goes from a flat piece of paper to just going sagging and slumping. So when you're learning, run with colder water.
So then you're going to just get off all the excess water?
Yep, just drag it along the edge of the bowl. Dip, drag along the edge to get off the excess, and have your mold right there, and just slide it straight onto that mold, and you'll watch it sag. And if it's not completely in contact with the mold, you can use a mop brush that's damp to just push it into the crevices of the mold. You can use a finger if it's damp, and again, just push into the crevices of the mold. What I see people do is they overwork and they just go crazy, bouncy, 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 and you can tear the wafer paper because it's very soft at this point, and you just won't get as good of a mold. One more thing, wafer paper has two sides. It'll have a smoother side and it'll have a dimply or rougher side. If I'm doing a flower, I'm going to put the smooth side against the texture mat. If I'm doing a leaf, I might put the rough side down because then you get the leaf pores and it's a little bit more interesting looking. So again, experiment. It will take a little bit of experimentation.
I like that. That's cool. It gives you two different mediums almost to work with. That's great.
Yes.
And I saw in the last slide that once it's set down, you don't want to move it, right?
Nope. You can't pick it up and move it. Again, it'll just be gummy, worse than a wet paper towel. You can pull it off and put a new petal on. If it's already touched another petal, just let it be. Although, if it's not the prettiest mold in the world, put it at the bottom of a flower, put it at the bottom of a design, let it be bulk for something else. The really, really pretty stuff, or the pieces that came out really nice, set those aside and reserve those for your heroes. Because the wafer paper shrinks when it dries, you'll see that the wafer paper on that mold is shrinking in two directions, side to side, and it'll shrink in length. That's why in this particular picture that's up right now, you'll notice on the flower mold that the wafer paper is actually going a little bit over the end. It's because I'm locking that in place so I can keep the length. Now that petal will shrink up a little bit. And that can be cool because, you can take this same mold and just how you shape and how you cut the petals is going to give you different effects. I can take that mold and do spider mums. I can make a butterfly. I can make a bow. Again, adaptive. Think adaptive instead of literal with this mold. If you overlap the petals too much, too deep, it's not going to look as lifelike. It's going to look a lot more heavy-handed. It can even tear as it dries because, again, you've got these two pieces of paper and they're shrinking away from each other, and if you're too much, something will just give and it'll start tearing. So again, it is going to take a little bit of practice to figure out what works for you and what doesn't.